that the world is going to get a lot funnier and like weirder. If you think that something someone is doing, these efforts is written by AI, I tend to think that for at least the foreseeable future, this is going to lead towards more demand for people doing work, not less. If you've gotten the cost of providing that service down to 1/10 of what it would have otherwise been, maybe now that actually makes sense to go do.
All right, Mark, thanks for coming on the podcast again.
Yeah, happy to do it. Good to see you.
You too. Last time you were here, you had launched Llama 3.
Yeah.
Now you've launched Llama 4.
Well, the first version.
That's right. What's new? What's exciting? What's changed?
Oh, well, I mean, the whole field's so dynamic. So, I mean, I feel like a ton has changed since the last time that we talked. Meta AI has almost 1 billion people using it now monthly. So that's pretty wild. And, I think that this is going to be a really big year on all of this because especially once you start getting the personalization loop going, which we're just starting to build in now, really, from both the context that all the algorithms have about what you're interested in feed and all your profile information, all the social graph information, but also just what you're interacting with the AI about. I think that's just going to be kind of the next thing that's going to be super exciting. So really big on that. The modeling stuff continues to make really impressive advances too, as you know. The Llama 4 stuff, I'm pretty happy with the first set of releases. We announced 4 models and we released the first 2, the Scout and Maverick ones, which are kind of like the mid-size models, mid-size to small. It's not like, actually the most popular Llama 3 model was the 8 billion parameter model. So we've got one of those coming in the Llama 4 series too. Our internal code name for it is Little Llama, but that's coming probably over the coming months. But the Scout and Maverick ones, they're good. They're some of the highest intelligence per cost that you can get of any model that's out there. Natively multimodal, very efficient, run on one host, designed to just be very efficient and low latency for a lot of the use cases that we're building for internally. And that's our whole thing. We basically build what we want, and then we open source it so other people can use it too. So I'm excited about that. I'm also excited about the Behemoth model, which is coming up. That's going to be our first model that is sort of at the frontier. I mean, it's like more than 2 trillion parameters. So it is, it's, as the name says, it's quite big. So we're kind of trying to figure out how we make that useful for people. It's so big that we've had to build a bunch of infrastructure just to be able to post-train it ourselves. And we're kind of trying to wrap our head around how does the average developer out there, how are they going to be able to use something like this? And how do we make it so it can be useful for distilling into models that are of reasonable size to run? Because you're obviously not going to want to run, something like that in a consumer model. But yeah, there's a lot to go. I mean, as you saw with the Llama 3 stuff last year, the initial Llama 3 launch was exciting, and then we just kind of built on that over the year. 3.1 was when we released the 405 billion model. 3.2 is when we got all the multimodal stuff in. So we basically have a roadmap like that for this year too. So a lot going on.
I'm interested to hear more about it. There's this impression that the gap between the best closed source and the best open source models has increased over the last year, where I know the full family of Llama 4 models isn't out yet, but Llama 4 Maverick is 35 on Chatbot Arena, and then on a bunch of major benchmarks, it seems like O4 Mini or Gemini 2.5 Flash are beating Maverick, which is in the same class. What do you make of that impression?
Yeah, well, okay, there's a few things. I actually think that this has been a very good year for open source overall, right? If you go back to where we were last year, what we were doing with Llama was like the only real super innovative open source model. Now you have a bunch of them in the field. And I think in general, the prediction that this would be the year where open source generally overtakes closed source as the most used models out there, I think is generally on track to be true. I think the thing that's been sort of an interesting surprise, I think positive in some ways, negative in others, but I think overall good, is that it's not just Llama. There are a lot of good ones out there. So I think that that's quite good. Then there's the reasoning phenomenon, which you basically are alluding to with talking about O3 and O4 and some of the other models. And I do think that there's this
specialization that is that's happening, where if you want a model that is sort of the best at math problems or coding or different things like that, I do think that these reasoning models with a lot of the ability to just consume more test time or inference time compute in order to provide more intelligence is a really compelling paradigm. But for a lot of the applications that, and we're going to do that too. We're building a Llama 4 reasoning model, and that'll come out at some point. For a lot of the things that we care about, latency and good intelligence per cost are actually much more important product attributes. If you're primarily designing for a consumer product, people don't necessarily want it to wait like half a minute to go think through the answer. If you can provide an answer that's generally quite good too in like half a second, then that's great, and that's a good trade-off. So I think that both of these are going to end up being important directions. I am optimistic about integrating the reasoning models with kind of the core language models over time. I think that's sort of the direction that Google has gone in with some of the more recent Gemini models, and I think that's really promising. But I think that there's just going to be a bunch of different stuff that goes on. You also mentioned the whole chatbot arena thing, which I think is interesting, and it goes to this challenge around how do you do the benchmarking, right? And basically, how do you know what models are good for which things? And one of the things that we've generally tried to do over the last year is anchor more of our models in our Meta AI product North Star use cases, because the issue with both kind of open source benchmarks and any given thing like the LM Arena stuff is they're often skewed for either a very specific set of use cases, which are often not actually what any normal person does in your product. They are often weighted, kind of the portfolio of things that they're trying to measure is different from what people care about in any given product. And because of that, we've found that trying to optimize too much for that stuff is often led us astray and actually not led towards the highest quality products and the most usage and best feedback within Meta AI.